session of the Red Sea 360 in association with Winston Baker. Last session this year, because we hope to continue doing this year after year, and it's just going to grow. I'm Amy Baker. I am the CEO and co-founder of Winston Baker. It's truly an honor and a privilege that we are here partnered with the Red Sea International Film Festival in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. What a beautiful place to be. And now you're going to hear something very exciting that I think also will continue to grow in conversation, and that's storytelling in the metaverse. So I have the definite privilege, it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Mr. Mo. Been my friend for many, many years. He's also my beautiful mind friend because his mind is so expansive, it makes mine kind of explode every now and then. There's so much information, but you're in for a real treat because he's gonna walk you through some of the basic steps before the conversation and get everyone a little bit acclimated. So Mo's an award-winning producer and advisor for Web3, Metaverse, and NFT projects with a focus on digital property rights. That's his background. When we say award-winning producer, he has won a Grammy, just as an FYI. Mo, can you come to the stage, please? Yes. Mr. Mo.
Hey. Thank you. All right. So, hello, everyone. I am very happy to be here. Welcome to Red Sea's 360 Storytelling in the Metaverse. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and thank everyone at the Red Sea Film Foundation and Film Festival for inviting me here today. It's my first time in this beautiful city of Jeddah, and I'm grateful for the warm welcome, the hospitality that many have extended to me. I would also like to thank everyone at Winston Baker for the opportunity to be here today, helping storytellers better understand the metaverse and all of the possibilities for building cultural collaborations. Thank you, Amy, Katie, and the entire team at Winston Baker. Today we have an exciting discussion with two people who've been at the forefront of building digital frontiers, both on the silver screen and in real life on the internet. We will explore how companies, brands, and storytellers are using the metaverse today to build new experiences and creator economies in Web3. We are in the middle of a renaissance of art and technology. Blockchains are at the center of disrupting how royalties have traditionally worked, removing many intermediaries. And it's never been a better time to start learning and help move the entertainment community forward in this chapter of the internet, which we refer to as the metaverse. So let's begin. I want to walk everyone through some basic fundamentals of the technology, and I prepared a keynote here. We'll walk through it, and then I'd like to introduce our two guests today, which I think you're going to love this conversation. So let's begin here. So, storytelling in the metaverse. So on my way here, I watched this wonderful documentary about ancient architects in Saudi Arabia, and it prompted me to think about storytellers, beginning with cave paintings and how the canvas has evolved from books to motion picture to television to streaming video, and now the metaverse. The metaverse is a new canvas for us as storytellers. When we think about the internet, we have to understand the evolution of the internet. So I want to walk you through some very basic concepts. Number one is if we went back to the dot-com era, we refer to that as Web 1. And Web 1 was a time where we were learning. And Web 1 is about reading. It gives us the first generation of internet companies like Google, Amazon, eBay, where we learn how to use our emails and log online and begin our journey on the internet. Web 2 became a moment where we were able to write, to express ourselves, to have human expression, using platforms like YouTube for streaming video, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and all the other social media platforms. It is the age of writing. Web 3 is all about ownership. We know that all of the content, all of the pictures, all of the videos today that you post on social media, you do not have any control over, and you can easily be deplatformed. So how can we change that? The way that we change that is by using a decentralized ecosystem, a more distributed technology that allows us to have ownership. That is introduced through a technology called Bitcoin. And the reason why Bitcoin is important is because the underlying technology, which we refer to as the blockchain, that is what allows us to do something to create scarcity. Before that, we didn't know how to do that. If you took a picture and you sent that, it would make multiple copies. So this is such a breakthrough in technology. And the CEO of Google understood the value of that as well. So talking about NFTs and how we should think of this new technology, I want to share just a very simple concept, how vending machines work today. It does not require any human beings. And you can simply, it's all pre-programmable. You can walk up to it, choose a product, select a product, verify a payment, and then it will dispense a product. Smart contracts are very much like a vending machine. It's all pre-programmed. The only difference is you're doing that with intellectual property, whether that's music, whether that's a film, any type of human expression. So the uniqueness of these smart contracts also is it allows you to dial in a royalty. So you can purchase a digital collectible, you can hold it, but if you choose to sell that, there is a royalty that will always make its way back to the creator of that piece of art or that piece of expression. It is an enabling creator economies, which is game-changing. So you can program NFTs. NFTs have different utilities. So you can program this for multiple different applications. I think we will see this across all of the different categories and segments in entertainment, from music videos to books to merchandising to films to games, using NFTs for ticketing, using ticketing for meet and greets, and of course, using NFTs for VR and the Metaverse, token gating. Now, if you look at the most successful NFT collections today, you will notice that they are successful mainly because of their communities and the shared network effects. So these communities coming together are creating a lot of value, and it's really a great opportunity now to, again, begin to take a step forward and learn about all of this new wonderful technology that is happening. So some use cases. Paramount Studios now is beginning to take some of their IP, some of their franchises like Star Trek and Top Gun and Nickelodeon. You can build your own NFT collection across Paramount's library and buy and trade in secondary markets. We're seeing Hollywood taking a step in this direction. Of course, Stranger Things also taking a step toward NFT technologies for collectibles. So this is making us very excited about the future of digital collectibles and NFTs for IP. And of course, metaverses like Sandbox today are innovating with all different type of IP and brands, musicians, and I think that these platforms are going to open up another chapter for us and content creators. But I do believe that the killer application for Metaverse are the storytellers. The storytellers will be at the front of this. This reminds me of early days YouTube, when people didn't understand it. They simply opened up an account, they built a channel, and sometimes people would laugh because they only got a few hundred views on their videos. They were finding their voice. But the people who learned early and stuck with it were able to build these channels and these audience that were able to aggregate millions of views and eventually monetize, making millions and tens of $millions for some of these social media influencers. In culture, you see MTV, the best metaverse performance is now a category. We see culture adapting and moving this forward. Super exciting. Sandbox, working with artists like Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg has been innovating in the space. He recently acquired the rights for the Death Row catalog. He pulled that from the streaming platforms, and he made that available through an NFT collection. He was able to sell about $44 million worth of all of this. Now, this is an anomaly. This doesn't always happen, but I think it shows you the potential of what NFT technologies and collectibles and the metaverse and where we're moving in that direction. These are creator economies. Bored Ape Yacht Club is also, I think, a wonderful example of how we can reimagine brands, how we can reimagine characters, and how fans, community members, and NFT holders can participate and actually have an ownership and be able to use commercial usage rights for the end consumer. Some of the top NFT collections like Bored Ape also create extensions. And you see Hollywood agencies also moving to want to represent some of these brands, such as Bored Ape. So you see the CAAs of the world, you see Universal, you see WEMA, all of them moving in that direction. They recognize the potential of the technology. And of course, for new storytellers, for digital creators, this is a friend of mine who's a digital creator. She is building her own metaverse by herself with incredible environments. And each one of those pictures is actually an NFT collection. So this, I think, also the potential to be able to build metaverses, to lay stories, to have multiple metaverses act as episodes. And of course, moving forward, the opportunity of creating DAOs. So this is very new. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations, and it's about communities coming together and being able to aggregate all forms of intellectual property, from art, music, games, sports. Here's kind of what it looks like, the 7 layers of the metaverse. This is kind of just the technical breakdown. I just wanted to show you this. I don't want to get too much into the technical, but this is what the metaverse technically looks like when we lay that out. In the center of that also is for storytellers to build their creator economies inside of all this new infrastructure. So that's the presentation for our keynote, and what I'd like to do is introduce today our guests who are going to be having a conversation on the metaverse. So today we have the privilege and honor to have award-winning film producer Donald Kushner here with us, who introduced to the world the first movie about a metaverse called Tron, starring Jeff Bridges. All right. Donald is a film and television producer of over 80 films, 1,000 hours of television, including Tron, Legacy, and Monster, which Charlize Theron won the Academy Award. Amazing. Freeway with Reese Witherspoon and Whole Wide World with Renee Zellweger. He is also the founder of Gumbotron, a new Web3 studio. He owned and operated the Chinese Theater in Hollywood and renowned resort to Bunch Palms. Today, we also have the privilege and honor to have Yatsu here with us, an entrepreneur, an investor, a musician, a gaming pioneer, an advocate for digital property rights. Please, wonderful. Yatsu began his journey at the tender age of 13 at Atari Computer in Germany, and in 1998 founded Outblaze, a technology company that develops gaming apps for smartphones. In 2009, he sold part of his business to IBM, which opened its first cloud computing laboratory in Hong Kong. In 2011, co-founded Animoca Branch, which is a world leader in blockchain investing with a portfolio of over 340 companies, and is one of CoinDesk's most influential voices in 2022. Animoca Brands, with a valuation close to $6 billion, is leading the charge to bring to the world true digital property rights. So everyone, please give another warm welcome to Donald and Yatsu. All right, so this is exciting because these are two people who I really look up to And what I want to do is I want to start with kind of a little bit of the history of the metaverse. So, Donald, you created the movie Tron. Tron was the first introduction into popular culture. It's the first time we saw it on the screen. And fast forward 40 years, I think it's becoming a reality in the world. So can you share with us a little bit of the backstory? And let me also include this, that in 1992, the term metaverse was introduced to the world through Neil Stephenson's book, Snow Crash. But 10 years before that was Tron. So can you share a little bit about your journey in the process and how Tron actually came to light?
Sure. Welcome. So Tron was the first depiction of what the electronic world, and Tron became the first depiction of the metaverse. And characters in the electronic world became the first avatars. And Tron used the first film to use computer animation. At the time when we were producing the movie, there were like 4 companies in the United States that produced animation and computer animation, and we booked them for the entire year. Someone today could probably create that in an Apple computer in an afternoon. So that's how much we've come from in 40 years. Also in Tron, there was the battle between the mainframe computer and the personal computer, which forecasted the Web 3 that Mr. Mo was talking about. And also, in 1982, a man named Hal Finney worked on the Tron video game. Yes. Hal Finney is my belief to be Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin. So Tron has a whole history of forecasting the metaverse and Bitcoins. So
that is amazing. That there's this incredible connection to Tron, Atari, and Hal Finney. And yeah, you at a very young age started at Atari. And could you share a little bit about that? Kind of your first step into.
Oh, thank you. So it's a great pleasure to be here. For me, I grew up in Austria, in Vienna. So and it was kind of interesting because I was definitely a minority growing up there, first of all. And I was studying music as well because my parents are musicians. So the Atari had this computer, the Atari ST, that had MIDI ports that allowed me basically to cheat because I could write composition software and outperform my fellow other students in terms of composition. That wasn't particularly impressive for my teachers, but I uploaded the software in what was kind of a pre-internet service called CompuServe, for any of you who might remember. And that was sort of before the internet. And there I uploaded the software, and people started to appreciate the software and started sending me money, literally checks in the mail, because there was no such thing as PayPal. We're talking about sort of the mid-'80s here.
Right.
And what was fascinating is that I made friendships and connections and eventually led to a job at Atari with complete strangers in the 80s who didn't know who I was, didn't know how old I was, or the fact that I was ethnically Chinese but growing up in Austria. That didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that I knew how to write software, that was interesting, and that I seemed like a reasonable guy in a chat room. Okay, and that was entirely virtual. So I would say that sort of for me, even though I never thought of it as the metaverse, this sort of metaphysical plane that I was existing in, making relationships and friendships, some of them that became long-term friendships virtually online, was my reality. And that reality continued on. And for me, then I started an ISP in Hong Kong later on. And for me, it was just about sort of onboarding more people online, not thinking of it as in terms of metaverse, but just simply that, thinking of it in terms of that this is the kind of reality that we would eventually be in anyway, which I think today, over 5.5 billion people are online, spending most of their time online, actually. Their virtual identity is probably more valuable than a physical one. So I would say that it's just really evolved into sort of the metaverse as we see today.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about creator economies. And I think creator economies have the potential to really open up new markets and to really help storytellers find their voice, to use the metaverse as this palette. Can you give us kind of a macro picture first and just help the audience understand a little bit more about creator economies and the benefit of that? We're in the age of tokenization. Recently, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink said that the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenized. He believes that everything's going to get tokenized. Do you see that?
Absolutely. And I think the one thing people need to understand about tokens is that, take away crypto Wall Street, which is kind of what people are talking about often today, like FTX and all the kind of those token saga. But just really what blockchain does is it creates a transparent public ledger for all of our data. Now, today, especially being in the kingdom, the most valuable resource is could be considered oil, energy, all that stuff. But actually, the most valuable resource, we think, is data. Because data has limitless network effects that you can construct with. But the problem with data today, and this is where we get to creator economies, is that we are unable to measure the value of that data because it sits inside a private database. It sits inside Facebook, it sits inside Amazon, it sits inside Tencent, and we do not know what it's worth to them. We know the output, billions and billions of dollars of profit, but we don't know what it's worth. But we all use it. So from our perspective, every person who uses Instagram, who uses TikTok, we're actually working for the platform. We're giving value to that platform. In the paradigm, this is where creator economies comes in, of this, we then get to measure on-chain what that value is. So if you knew that your time on Facebook was earning Facebook $10,000 a year, your natural response would be, give me a share of that. Right? However, the other response would be, if Facebook doesn't want to pay it to you, someone else comes to you and says, let me pay you $5,000 for you to join my platform because I now know what you're worth. We do this today with influencers. How do we do it? We measure how many likes they have, how many followers they have, how popular they are. We make an assumption. We say, I think you can create this value for me. I don't know what you're really worth, but I'm making this approximation. And the platforms don't want us to know what that is.
Right.
So what blockchain does, Web3, the open metaverse, is it makes it transparent and open. So if you're an artist and you're making basically NFT art, for instance, or you're a creator making game items, you now know what that value is through the entire system. You can know that my time in a game is worth $1,000, $500, $300, whatever that value might be. And that value translates into basically a kind of income and a royalty. So for every person who's a creator, I think this is the other paradigm, is it's one kind of creator who makes art specifically for the purpose of selling something, but it's also the fact that because we're all data generators, we're all created to the network effect, which means every one of us is a kind of creator, right? An indirect, every participant to the conversation adds to the creative process and now is able to take a share, maybe a smaller share than the primary artist, but a participatory, collaborative version in where you can therefore take a cut in it.
So royalties, I mean, that's the center, that's the lifeblood. Can you talk a little bit about digital property rights? I mean, you were mentioning, data is, I think it's Andreessen said, data is the new oil, absolutely. NFTs are this, one of the themes here actually at the festival is film as a culture, as a store of culture. Do you see NFTs as a store of culture?
NFTs are a store of digital culture because now it's something that can be stored permanently on-chain, away from central platforms. So in the same way that people used to draw sort of paintings or write books as a way to sort of maintain the culture and the legacy of that, you can do now the same in a digital way. Because right now, if you think about it, your data that might be an Instagram post actually isn't your data. And Instagram can take it down, and then that's gone, right? There's actually no legacy, no history that's attached to it. So again, with Web3, that solves that. But the beautiful thing is, of course, that thereafter, because it's your property, it's your equity, you are entitled to a right to it. Which means that when, you've seen many stories where NFT artists would resell their art. They didn't do it, but they would resell, 10, 20 times. Every time they get maybe 5 or 10% of the sales. This is actually quite liberating because artists who might become very famous later on today don't have any entitlement to it in the physical world. Right? They don't get that. And so they have to keep working even at their old age, even though someone benefited from their work and their fame. This is actually also true for music, it's true for film, it's true for everything in the creative process because central intermediaries are the ones who take control of that. Like, if you're as a musician, music on Spotify is literally worth like, pennies on the millions of streams. That doesn't make sense. But that's basically what they do because we don't know what it's worth. The on-chain dynamics basically changes that. And you can now basically give a right tax back. But the other benefit is that a fan who is paying for it now has a direct relationship with the artist, because again, it's on-chain. I know who the buyer is of that NFT, and therefore I can establish a direct relationship, which means you can now identify your 1,000 true fans. Because just like in the real world, you will have a few thousand people maybe that really, really love everything about you, and there might be millions of people who know of you, but they have sort of I've heard of you and I like you, but I don't really love you, right? Those relationships are the ones that actually is a fan economy, and blockchain basically enables it for all sorts of artists and creators to take advantage of.
Donald, when you look back and you see actually Tron, 40 years later, you see Disney creating these roller coaster rides. Like, why are you building a Web3 studio, and why are you not working with like Disney?
Well, I mean, there's a Disney Tron ride in Shanghai, and they're spending $1 billion for the Tron ride in Disneyland. So I think in the future, I've created a company called Gumbotron, of which is it's reimagined dinosaurs come back to planet Earth in the not too distant future to help mankind deal with the environment and deal with each other. And we're opening participation to the community, and it's this community that will build the artistic future of what we're doing. I mean, my background is in entertainment, so we want to launch a Web3 series created in Tron we use computer animation, and right now we want to use these AI programs to create the characters and create the environments. But the important thing about entertainment is you still have to tell an engaging story, and you still have to build engaging characters. So that's why I'm interested in the Web3 economy that Yat was talking about.
Yeah, so audiences can participate and create with you, come together. Let's talk a little bit about the shared network effect, the importance of that. How do you see that unfolding in some of these Web3 projects? How instrumental are the communities?
It's fundamental, but I think the one thing to think about when you think about what is the value of any asset, forget whether it's an NFT or something physical.
Right.
It's about being able to measure its network effect.
Right.
Now, if you think about, for instance, an example that we love to talk about, it's the car, right? The origin of the car, the Ford Model T, was black and had one purpose, take you from point A to point B, and it was worth a certain price. Today, when you buy a car, you don't buy it for that purpose, because otherwise we'd still be just driving black cars. Maybe they go faster, but that's about it, right? What we buy a car for is a status symbol, something that says something about us. Maybe because it has nicer seats, maybe because it can maintain, be useful for the family. These are versions of network effects that are a little bit invisible, kind of like Adam Smith's invisible hand, when it sort of have property rights and the economics around it. But the other one are actually very clear network effects that come as well. For instance, you can finance a car, or someone can make baby seats for the car, or you can have Uber or Lyft, or you can have taxi drivers and people doing medallions for this type of business. The businesses that surround the car are actually much larger than the sale of the car itself. And the car itself is now more valuable to the end user because it has 1,000 more utilities back from when the original car was invented. And that's only possible because of decentralized property rights. Now you translate that into digital, you have the same effect. If I have, for instance, a virtual sword in a game, I can now use it in 10 different games. Someone else can give me a loan for it, or I can gift it to someone else, or I can transact it. It's the same effects. And then capital starts to form, and then value starts to get generated. And now you have the ability to trade it or other things if you want to, not that you have to. Mm-hmm. So these are the network effects that compound. So when you look at an NFT and you say, why is this thing worth tens of thousands of dollars? It's not because it just looks good. That's a different kind of network effect. Like when I buy the Mona Lisa, its network, I could never buy it, but let's just imagine for a moment, right? Its value is the fact that it has a limitless network effect because the whole world knows it. So that's a fame kind of network effect. If you think about fashion, like the Gucci bags or whatever that you buy, it's not the material that it's made of. 99% of why you buy it is a network effect that's both invisible and visible. And so I think NFTs are the same. And the invisible part is maybe the fame, but the visible part is the network effect. How many people are following it? How many people like it? How many people own it? right? How big is that community? How often do they talk about it? Is actually a way to try to measure the network effect, which, you know, in the old world you would say is fame, right? But actually on chain, you can now actually sort of measure it.
Amazing. Donald, so you have Gumbotron. You're working on this project called Cryptosaurs, and you're welcoming the audience and the fans to come and participate with you on the creation of this. Can you talk a little bit about Gumbotron and the other projects that you're working on? You were mentioning earlier in the conversation an art project and something with Broadway.
Yeah, I have a couple of projects. I'm doing an immersive project with the artist Keith Haring and Basquiat, and we're going to launch it in New York. And the other project I'm working on is an immersive Broadway project. We've purchased we made a long-term lease on the Liberty Theater on Broadway, and we're creating an immersive experience, a Broadway experience. We've licensed the top 20 musicals of all time, and we're going to get a star to sing. We have Christina Aguilera, who sings Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. So we have 20 of those things, and we're putting them on Broadway and in an immersive experience. So my goal is not just immersive experiences are also in the real world, but they also translate into the metaverse. And I think in the future, when I first started out creating shows, there was the movie theaters, and in the United States, there was 3 networks. And in France, there was 2 or 3 networks. In Germany, there was 2 or 3 networks. And then they became pay cable, and then there was basic cable, and then there was a family channel, and then there was a sports channel. It went on and on and on. And then came the streaming business, and the studios didn't really understand the streaming business. They just kind of, they let Netflix take it over because they really didn't understand this new platform. In the same way, I'm looking to create series and movies in the metaverse and in the Web3 platform, because I think that's the distribution platform of the future. And it's a global platform. It crosses borders. And in the era of non-globalization, I think it'll head back to the era of globalization.
Right. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about marketplaces. Where can we buy NFTs? Where OpenSea is one that we've heard of, but do you see these marketplaces continue to grow, to expand?
I mean, there's over 30, 40 marketplaces you can buy stuff from.
Wow.
OpenSea is the one that's most famous, but you'll also be able to get them in sort of, let's call it the local marketplaces of the platforms themselves. For instance, Reddit went out and issued NFTs to their fans, and that actually was a big onboarding experience.
Right.
And that's another way in which people receive NFTs, and they can trade them on OpenSea, but they can trade them somewhere else as well. For instance, in our own sandbox, you can trade the asset on OpenSea, but you can also trade it in the marketplace that is within the sandbox. And I think that's part of the beauty about NFTs, which is that it's yours to do with as you please. Right? You can maybe buy it and sell it in the platform that we would like you to do so, but since it is fully yours, you can do whatever you want with it. So I think that's really sort of how to look at that. And I think for a lot of people before, like Coinbase, for instance, has a marketplace as well. And what they're trying to do is make it easier for people, if they don't happen to have basically crypto, then how do I purchase one? So then you can use Coinbase Wallet and you can use your cash. So there's onboarding mechanisms that try to make it easier for people who are not as familiar with it.
Right. Elon Musk was sharing with Twitter that he has intentions to eventually turn on an NFT marketplace. So I'm wondering, like, do you see that opening another door for the content creators?
Absolutely. I think the more NFT marketplaces come out, the more ways in which they can be distributed and discovered, then actually the better it is for creator economies. And I think the faster the decentralized ones happen, it's better, because that's where the network effects accrue. As an artist, you don't want to build in something that's centralized. For instance, Facebook or /Meta would like you to build on their platform. And of course, that means you can't move it out, which means that it is not really fully yours. That's what they would like you to do, but actually, you should be able to monetize it in the open networks. So
we hear this term avatars, and I think this is a all about identity. Could you share with us a little bit about how Animoca is thinking about avatars and how the culture is moving forward and the evolution of that and where it's going?
I mean, I think to us, avatars are just another extension of our identity.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's digital or physical. It just happens to be that most of us are now spending time, especially a younger generation, spending time digitally. And they identify themselves in a digital context. So I think the same is true here. So what is an avatar? An avatar could be something that is, a skin, an item, identity. But also, just like you have in the physical world, the avatars can also represent different identities for different communities. So in the physical world, we do this as well. We're maybe different with our family than we are with our high school friends and we are with our work friends.
Right.
We actually have 3 or 4 different identities already. We're still the same person. Our values may still be the same, but we react and act differently in the communities that we are. In the virtual world, we do this too. When someone plays Fortnite and someone plays PUBG or someone plays another game, they don't always play the games with the same friends, right? So there are slightly different identities in these places. And so I think avatars basically are a way of representing that, and becomes a way in which you can sort of create a persona of who you are in multiple ways. Most of our kids spend, and actually younger generations spend most of the time online anyway, so their virtual identity is more important. Fashion as well. One of the reasons why Gucci and big fashion brands are all in this space is because they understand that what they sell in terms of fashion items is identity. When you're buying fashion and that stuff, that's really another form of identity, and avatars basically just do that, but in a virtual digital version.
Right. I'm curious, do you think we can get to a point where capital formation can happen using blockchains? Donald, you have a tremendous amount of experience doing, raising capital to make all type of films and television shows. Are you thinking that could be a potential in the future for being able for financing projects?
I think through NFTs, I think it'll definitely be in the future. I mean, I think we have to avoid any securities issues. So I think that the purchase of the NFT is going to have to be a certain part of the artwork or a certain part of the IP, rather than buying it as an investment. But I think that the way, if we can make and distribute films directly to the people, financed by the people, we can create a whole different economy and a whole different creative economy.
Right.
I just want to add that NFTs today already is a multi-billion-dollar space. Right. So just to be clear, right? And it's not just about sort of expensive Bored Apes, for instance.
Right.
It's also about general gaming items that are worth $5 or $10. Right, so this year alone, I think we will still be in excess of 10, or despite the bear market, we'll still probably be in excess of 10 or 12 billion dollars in terms of total volume of sales and transactions with NFTs. I mean, for a nascent industry that has only tens of millions of participants, that's pretty good. And so you can definitely fund a whole bunch of things in terms of projects, right? And if you look at, for instance, right now, even Sandbox is doing its land sales. It's maybe not worth, tens of millions of dollars in this market, but it's still millions of dollars of sales. I think for artists, it's incredibly liberating to make, sort of even some version of money like that. And even not just for artists that are sort of, let's say, in the creative space, but also for different kind of content creators, like for instance, teachers.
Right.
Teachers are making content and they are now able to sell it as a form of capital formation because this teaching content already makes, let's say, $1,000. Someone else is willing to pay maybe for a 20% type of yield, $5,000 for it. Now that's a big difference for a teacher's income to be augmenting it with $5,000 of income, which they then reinvest back by maybe making better content. Right, so capital formation is already happening. It's actually just really sort of liberating the content space and giving it the value that it deserves.
So I'm seeing a lot of brands interested in heading into the metaverse, and I think one of the big takeaways is in Web 2, they were kind of late to that game. And, but now I think they're realizing we need to be at the forefront of this, and we need to be experimenting and trying different experiences, building different experiences. Donald, some of the projects that you worked on eventually found partners. You were sharing with me earlier that some of the shows that you created were from brands.
Yeah, I mean, I was the animated film Pound Puppies was created by was sponsored by the toy company. I did a Transformers series that was it was like a daily show on the U.S. networks and worldwide that was created by the toy company. So I think we'll also see this in the metaverse. There will be, you know, the major brands will be sponsoring content, you know, to attract an audience to that. So I think what was in the past will also be in the future.
I think one thing to add here is that in the Web 2 version, for instance, if you look at, say, I think it was Travis Scott who did a performance on
Right.
Fortnite, Fortnite might pay them a fee for performing, and what really happens is that fans join the Fortnite community, and really Fortnite benefits from the growth of the users, and they paid a promotional fee for that. But in Web 3, you know, when Snoop Dogg opened up his mansion and he was basically selling the doggies, which is a membership sort of NFT, he generated $7 million of sales. So it's very different. And on top of that, not only did he generate the sales, he also ended up having the direct relationship with the owners of these doggies. Right? So it's not, so he doesn't lose long-term value from it. So that's the difference here, right? So one of them really is, the relationship is completely different between the Web 2 and Web 3 world. And it's a much better long tail to go do it the Web 3 way.
Right, so social media networks capture 99% of the value, but in Web 3 with blockchains, the artist can capture most of that value now.
Correct.
I don't think that's understood by most people.
Yeah, that's the opportunity there. What would you say are some of the challenges right now in the metaverse, or some of the misconceptions in the space?
Well, maybe I'll start, right? So I think one of the big misconceptions about the metaverse, particularly the Web3 metaverse, right, is that because it uses blockchain, it's always tied to crypto. And so there is a little bit of this distinction between, oh, but it's crypto, so is that like, you know, I heard this thing about this guy called Sam, he seems like a fraud. This is the whole space, right? He is a fraud, by the way. Yeah. But just to be clear, just to be clear here, you know, it's not the same, right? Wall Street crypto and tech and culture utility crypto is different. Right. It's an underlying infrastructure that we should be looking at. But people are confused because they don't know the difference. So that's one one big issue. The other one, I think, also is that there's confusion about the term metaverse. Because, you know, there's the open metaverse, which is what we're promoting. And then there's Facebook, who branded themselves Meta, because they wanted to own the narrative for the metaverse, which I think was a great PR stunt, because a lot of people are thinking, metaverse, isn't that Facebook? Of course it isn't. But that's what they want people to think. And that's, of course, the wrong kind of metaverse, because it's a closed ecosystem. It's trying to value capture just as we have in Web 2. Right? Web 3 is a sort of digital property rights / digital freedom version of that. And that's what we need to really strive towards. And because people don't know the difference, they sometimes think, oh, yeah, I'm already in the metaverse because I'm using Facebook, which, of course, we think is not the right metaverse. Right. So that's, I think, another area that we need to overcome and communicate on.
Right, and Donald, that's basically the story that you told in Tron, right? So Tron was under the control of Master Controller. Jeff Bridges' character, Flynn, lost his IP. And fast forward today, I agree, that's kind of the Facebook, where they're in control of that. So the open metaverse, I think, is the way forward.
It's the rebellion.
It's the rebellion, yes. How about advice for storytellers? What advice would you give the storytellers to use Metaverse as this new platform, as not a platform, but a canvas to be able to tell stories and build these creator economies? What's the, how do they get involved in that process?
Well, I think storytelling goes back to the Greeks and the Romans. It goes back to Shakespeare. You know, I think to create engagement is you have to have a story. And with a story, you have to have characters. And the story has to progress somewhere, it has to go somewhere, and you have to relate to it. So I think in the metaverse, ultimately, it's the storytellers that will create the community, and the characters that the storytellers create will help create the community. So for me, it's been from the beginning of time. It's the court jester sat in front of the pharaoh or the king, told the story and kept people engaged. You know, Shakespeare kept people engaged. So I think in the future, it's not just the technology in the metaverse, but it's people telling stories that are engaging and characters that are engaging and characters that are heartfelt and that overcome something, you know, so that we can relate to them in our own journey through life.
I would also add that on top of that is that if you want to learn about the metaverse, then you have to join it. It doesn't have to be, you know, an expensive experience. You have to maybe see what's happening in the sandbox. You have to join the Discord community, you know, meet them. It's no different than, you know, it's no different than sort of learning about a country or a nation and entering. If you want to do business in the metaverse, then you have to enter it. If you want to do business in the kingdom, you have to enter it. If you want to do business in China, you have to go to China, right? You can't just do it by doing it remotely. You can't be a tourist. And I think the same is true here.
Great. Okay. I think we may have time for a couple of questions. Yet I know that you have a hard out at before 3. So any questions that the audience have that like to share?
Thank you very much. Trying to get my head around all of this. I understand the importance of blockchain, particularly for the provenance of art, and started understanding it as a documentary filmmaker who has actually sold the film for cash, right? But then has also had to pursue others who have put it up for free, right, on the internet. How does that work in terms of film, and how does a metaverse work? And
So
I just
first,
don't get it.
right. So first, in terms of IP rights protection, actually, blockchain is perhaps the best form of digital original sort of authenticity, because the origin of the, let's say if the film was on chain, then you're able to measure what is a fake and what is the original. One of the problems about sort of piracy is that actually I don't know what's real or what isn't, because it's just a copy of it, right? But you can actually identify what is the original sort of identity of this. But the second interesting thing is it explores new business models from a sort of documentary, or for instance, for a photographer. A photographer, one of the movements in NFTs is CC0. Now that seems counterintuitive, the idea that if someone else starts to buy this NFT for a certain value, then all the rights on the images become entirely free. It's almost like you're giving your documentary for free. Now, I'm not saying you do that, but the thought experiment, and that's worked for artists, is that the result is that the art becomes more famous, because now that it's CC0, more people get to see it. It's like the Mona Lisa effect, right? It's Mona Lisa's famous because everyone knows it. Leonardo da Vinci could make the best painting. If it was hidden and nobody knew about it, it's not valuable, right? And so it's the same thing. So if this documentary, for instance, then became famous through its collectors and was viewed by, 10 million people, and they loved the documentary, then the original owner or ownership of the original documentary would become valuable, right? So that's another way. So what it really does is it opens up new business models. But from an authentic standpoint, you can always police it much better. You can basically enforce it much easier if that's what you want. But you can also get value from it from the community of the viewers who are participating in it. So you have many more options, because today, if you were to promote it, you might have to have an Instagram page, right? Or Facebook page. You actually don't have a relationship with the consumers. You don't know who they are. And in Web3, you can actually directly communicate with them.
Right. And probably even take some of the narratives of the documentary and create a virtual gallery where they can actually come and visit and interact with.
One of the powerful things just on this one is that you made a documentary and you now create a following. When you are doing an add-on to this documentary, that following is right there that you can actually monetize if you wanted to. Whereas in the Web2 narrative, you first have to pay Facebook some money to re-communicate with them. And actually, you also don't know whether this fan is really your fan. You have no idea. Whereas in Web3, the person who owns the NFT has made a financial commitment to you. So this is not just a regular user. It is someone who has already said, I'm putting my money into this project. I am a co-owner of some sort, and I have a belief in this, which is a much more powerful experience.
Great.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. But I'm still a bit confused. I'm a storyteller, and I want to tell my story in the metaverse. What would be the process now to learn more and maybe get to the point where I can really tell it?
So I think, and not to toot too much our own horn, but I think Sandbox might be the easiest way to experience it, because you can build your story in the sandbox, which has tools to make you build sort of that experience, kind of like a game, but through without programming knowledge. Now, there's other ways you can do that as well, but that's probably the easiest format. But the reason you do it in Sandbox isn't just because you want to build an experience. You could build your own experience in Unreal, you could use Unity, you can hire a programmer. It's because Sandbox already has a community of 250,000 people, 23,000 landowners, and the owners in the Sandbox care about open metaverse related stuff. So you're tapping into that network. It's like when Nike or when Adidas or Gucci entered the metaverse. They didn't just launch a website. They bought a Bored Ape, they bought land in the Sandbox, they did something in Decentraland. They were signaling to those communities, we're here and we're serious. So it's probably the same, I would say it's the same thing for really anything, including your story building exercise.
Yep.
So I apologize, I have to go.
Great. Yep. That is concluding today's conversation with Yatsu and Donald Kushner. Please give another round of applause. Great. Excellent. Thank you. All right. All right. Excellent.
Thank you so much for joining us. That concludes the Red Sea 360.